So hi, feels like I've been working in a bit of a button factory today, making buttons for our new blended learning site that we're going to be using this fall when school starts. So I thought I would share some of the process of creating these buttons that I went through today because it might be helpful to you as well. My first course of action was to go ahead and hit the plus sign and use the built-in tools that that Google Sites has. And so I would go in and I'd go into select image, and it brings me to all the different search tools. So I was going to Google image search because the images there should be free to use. That's a great thing, but it often means that you're not going to have great selection. So if I'm looking for a 3 that is blue, I'm going to get some choices, but I'm not going to get a ton. And there are 2 here that I liked, and I did try both of them. And the fact that they were rectangular instead of square, you get that whole round peg square hole thing. Square items look better on square buttons, so it didn't work out for me. Not to mention that if I was looking for the 9 to go with this 3 and I type in 9 here, I still have, oh, there's the blue 9, but there's no 9 with stars on it. But then there's a cute one that looks like an animal, so maybe I want to look at those. So I was on a bit of a wild goose chase to find things that matched, and then realized that I just had to do it myself. So the tool that I like to use to create my own buttons is Google Slides. Google Slides is a great little desktop publishing program because literally what you see is what you get, and then you can use your screen capture tool to be able to grab what you need for your website. So in this case, I wanted to create something that said grade 3. So I came here and I created 2 different text boxes, one for the black text and one for the blue text. And I went right to my favorite, which is the homemade apple script. But now that I have the size all the way up to 50, I really didn't like how grainy it looked. To me, it looked kind of funny. So I started again and used only the font Love You Like a Sister, which is another one that I like, but you can see the text is much smoother. So all of the text is in a size 50 and all of the numbers are a size 100. Is that the rule? No, it's not. You can figure out what works for your parameters and fool around with it. I just found that it worked well for me today. So literally all I'm doing is I'm opening up a brand new slide. And a lot of you, when I see you working with Google Slides, you work with these existing boxes. But I like to get rid of them. There are 2 ways to get rid of them. Either you can click far away from them and drag across them so it will highlight both and then hit your delete key. Or instead, you can click on one at a time. And when you click on one, you can either type in it or you click right on the little frame. And when you do that, then you can delete it. So if you click in it, it's going to type, but if you click on the frame, then you can hit delete. Whatever works for you, but I like to start with an empty slate. So the next thing I'm going to need is a text box. And I know I just threw away 2 text boxes, but I like to do things my way. So I'm grabbing a text box, and then I'm going to stretch it across. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that it's centered. So I'm going to center my text box. And then I'm also going to center it from top to bottom. So I have this one and this one. So now I know anything that I type in this box is centered. So in the case of my first button, I typed in the word grade, which does not look all that fancy right now. But that's where I had to go through and kind of fool around with some of my fonts. So I would highlight the text and I go up here to my font choices. And there are a bunch that come with Google. And you might or might not know that beyond the list that is here, you can also go up here to more fonts. And guess what? There's more fonts. Oh my goodness. So you can go in and you can find something else that you like. You can show it by ones that are like script or ones that are handwriting ones. I'm going to get rid of all scripts. So handwriting ones, which are some of my favorites. I have a lot of these in mine already. So let's say I like Satisfy and I click OK. So now that's going to be in my list of fonts and it's going to change my font. That one's actually kind of nice. But I need to change the size. I can go up, 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 plus, plus until I get to what I want. Or I can type in a number like 50. Oops. I can type in a number like 50 and hit enter. And then it jumps up. Or when I click here, I can choose any of these numbers. Like I can choose 60, whatever works. That's actually a very nice one. And now I'm going to need another text box because I want to put the number 3 in something separate. So I'm going back to the T. I'm stretching it across. I'm going to go up and I'm going to change it from centered to centered. And now I'm going to put in the number 3, which is going to be really little. Now I know I want this to be blue, so I'm going to highlight it and go to my color picker. And I know that this is the blue that I go to most often when I'm working on Mashpee projects. And then again, I'm going to go ahead and change the size on it. I'm going to try 100 and see how that looks. So far so good, but I don't like the font. It's too plain. So that's when I would go, back up into my font picker and choose something else that I would want. Usually I want for a number, I'd want something pretty bold that stands out. So I could try impact and see how that works. So now I have 2 text boxes. So now what I'm doing is I'm designing the way that I want them to look together. And there's a couple ways you can do this, but I'm clicking on the bottom box. I could stretch it out to make sure that the box surrounds the number, but for this type of project, you don't really need to do that. But you do, if you're going to move it around, you do need to get those 4 arrows, because that's like your directions as to which direction you're going to go in. So once you have the 4 arrows, you can click and you can drag your box wherever you want it. Or once you've clicked those 4 arrows, you can use the directional keys or the arrow keys on your keyboard to really fine tune where you want it. So let's say this is exactly what I wanted. I have right now my grade and my 3 spaced pretty nicely apart, and I like the way it looks. So now there's 2 ways that I can make sure that I'm ready to make a button. For me, a button has to be centered in the middle of a square. So I first want to lock these 2 together. I can either click and drag across them and it will highlight both of those text boxes, and now you'll see they'll move together when I move them. So that's one way to do it, like that, and then they'll move. Or you can take and you can highlight each of them by clicking the first one and then holding your shift key down and clicking the second one. You can even go one step further and you can go ahead and you can lock them together by going to arrange, and you can group them. So once I group them, they become one. So I can now grab them and move them. They'll be stuck together all the time. I don't always do that when I'm doing this design project, because sometimes when I change to another number or another word, I like them being separated. But for now, I'll leave it locked together. The last thing that I make sure I do with my art is, now that it's all centered and it's grouped and it's stuck together, I want to make sure that the center of my box, top to bottom, is lined up under the 4, or you could pick the 5 or the 3, whatever you want to pick is fine. I use the 4, and then I want to make sure that the middle button is going to be lined up, or the middle square is going to be lined up with the 2. So if I click and I move my thing around, you'll see that you have the guidelines. You'll have the guidelines up at the top. So I have the 4 lined up, and if I go down a little bit, my 2 is lined up. So now that's going to make it easier for me to make a button, because when I go to do my screen capture, which I'll do now, and drag my mouse across the design, I want to make sure I'm getting pretty much a square. So here comes my screenshot. I'm going to start at the 2 and pretty much at the top, and I'm going to go over to the 6 because I know the 4 is in the middle, and then I'm going to drag down. I'm getting close to a square because I'm at basically 0, so that means I can go just a little less than 4. Now most of my buttons that I created, I made sure that they were a tiny bit closer to the bottom, but that was just my preference. It's not a rule or anything. And so when I let go on my computer, I'm on a Mac, it creates my screenshot. On my Mac, the button to do that selection is Command-Shift-4, and that's how you get that little crosshair to make your little screenshot. If you're on a PC, you can use your snipper or your clipper. I don't use a PC. And also on a Chromebook, there is a keystroke that you can use as well that will let you have that smaller selection. So now I've made my button, which you really can't tell, but if I were to go to my site and I were to click on this here, instead of going out onto the internet, I would now go to upload, and it's going to be wherever your screenshots live. So this is my grade 3 one that I just made, so I could put it in there. And it's going to be centered nicely because I made the whole selection a square. But I'm not going to use that. But to come back here, because this is a Google slideshow, I could do many different things. I could create an individual slide for each grade level. I could say, boy, I love this grade 3, so I could go and I could go to slide and I could duplicate it. And then in the next slide, I could just change the 4. Oop, remember, we also locked them together, so there's the 4. So I could do that, and then I could make one for 5. I basically just kept taking screenshots and then changing the number and taking a screenshot because it's easy enough to go back in and fix. But then when I started creating buttons that have words on them, I'd have to create 2 of them that have the blue text and 2 that had the black text. And if I show you, I can spread them out here so that you can see how I built them. So I get that little crosshair, that 4-way arrow, which is not always easy to find. So you can see I have 4 elements here that are making this one logo. So that's what I'm doing, is putting them exactly where I want them. And then I'm able to center them under the 4 and center them under the 2 and then do my screenshot. So you can always scroll back to see how to go through that. So you can decide exactly what you want it to look like before you're even done like taking your picture of it. So I would create different slides depending on what I've created. Like in this particular case, I added a text box that was bigger than this one down here. The size up here is 71 and this size down here is, I believe, 50. So just in case I need anything else similar, I can go back to this slide. Same thing with using when I made the pre-K one. The K is bigger than the other ones. I'm at 171 instead of 100. So it's just something that you can play with. And then when I saved it as text for the at-home learning website. And actually I should call this blended learning, text for blended learning. So that later if I need to go back in and make any updates to the site itself, or change buttons or add buttons, or know what size or what color or what font I used, I can always go back to the Google slideshow that matches that particular design. I'm sure I didn't cover all of your questions. Feel free to reach out to me either in this video, or if you work in Mashpee, you know how to find me, and I'm happy to help you. It's a way to make your site more like you.